Alright everybody, this is Sage Wanderer coming at you from my van down by the rainy river. It's raining today. I'm kind of stuck inside, so excuse the lighting. This is the first episode of a series that I would like to do on communist revolutions. In a recent poll that was taken on American universities, in excess of 60% of students on our universities agreed that they would accept communist government in the United States of America. 60%. Well, I believe this is mainly from ignorance of history. Once again, I lay this at the feet of the universities who are not teaching people the truth about the history of the world and our country and the struggles we've been involved in. I've heard many anti-fascists, while chasing some poor person down to smash them in the head with some object, proclaim that their grandfathers had fought Nazis and therefore they weren't going to tolerate any Nazis in their presence. Well, my family fought communists. To me, growing up, there was nothing more evil than the Communist Party, than the communist revolutions that were occurring around the globe. So in this first episode of this series, I would like to share with you some of the details concerning communist revolutions and how bloody and ugly they are. And in the end, I think you will realize that none of them have ever really worked. And none of them have ever really been successful. And the people of communist countries are among the most miserable on earth. So, in my first video on the series, I would like to talk about the Khmer Rouge of Cambodia. Now, if you're going to do a search on this, you got to know how to spell it or you'll have a hard time finding it. Khmer, K-H-M-E-R, Rouge, R-O-U-G-E. This was the regime of Pol Pot. Now, Pol Pot, a poor agricultural person from an agricultural family, was able to get educated in France and returned with some very communist ideas that he picked up at university in Paris, where ironically the same year he was there, 25% of the French citizens voted to accept communism. 25%. So he returns to Cambodia, where he begins to put together a peasant army. First, of course, he becomes part of the Communist Party in Cambodia and loses what he considered to be a rigged election, and capitalism stands for the moment in Cambodia. The neighbor immediately to the, I won't get into directions here, I'm bad with that, but their immediate neighbor was Vietnam. Vietnam was involved in a communist revolution of its own. So Pol Pot formed a peasant army of Cambodians who crossed the border into Vietnam and fought against the South Vietnamese and the United States government during the Vietnam War. Then he turned his sights back to his own homeland and started a war against his own government. And his regime was successful in obtaining control of the Cambodian government. And it reigned from 1979 to 1975 rather to 1979. So his reign was among the bloodiest and ugliest of all communist revolutions. More than 2 million Cambodians were either executed, starved, or tortured to death in that short period of time. That's 1 in 4 of all Cambodians, 25% death from that communist revolution. In the middle of his attempt to set up his socialist kingdom, he turned up many times on his own people. And, of course, in the very beginning, he believed that anything that had to do with city living or technology was evil. And therefore, all of the city people were rounded up and forced into labor camps in the countryside, planting in rice fields and working in manual labor. The restrictions on society were extreme, and the punishments for non-compliance were extreme. For instance, it was a death penalty to be caught foraging for food. Now, they only had so much food in these camps, and the peasants, who were always peasants, they got fed first and a full ration. But as the city dwellers, who were fed last, who were new to this countryside, came up, they always ran out of food. So these people from the cities were sent out into manual labor camps where they, essentially many of them, starved slowly to death while being worked to death. Pol Pot established 20 re-education prison camps. The most infamous of those was S-21. S-21 was a high school that had been turned into a prison. There were 20,000 people documented having been brought into that prison camp during the short reign of Pol Pot, and 7 known survivors. So out of more than 20,000 prisoners, only 7 survived to tell the story. These people were chained in concrete cubicles too small to hardly even stretch out in. And they had to ask for permission to even roll over to their other side in the night. If they did not ask the permission of the guard to roll over, they were given 100 lashes. So this continued on, and eventually the government of Vietnam invaded and took Pol Pot out of power. However, Pol Pot's forces began to fight on until 1991. All through the 80s, there were insurgents also in Cambodia that were being funded by the United States government in an attempt to overthrow the new government of the Vietnam government that was installed in Cambodia. That might have been a relief for many of the people. Unfortunately, most of the leadership of the Khmer Rouge was kept in place when the Vietnamese invaded. However, in 1991, after years of fighting on both sides, there was finally held free elections. The Khmer Rouge did not accept the elections, and they attacked many of the polling places. So they began to continue fighting on until 1999, when finally Pol Pot was arrested and later died in prison. So this is what communism brings you. This kind of murder and mayhem, executions and imprisonment, starvation. These are the themes of a communist takeover. I know no one is taking Antifa seriously, but you should look at them closer, because Cambodia was torn apart by a handful of child soldiers who were steeped in the communist doctrine. I don't know what it is about communism that creates converts that are so brainwashed and so bloody. But if we do not watch this new communist uprising in our country, we might very well be facing the killing fields right here in America. Till next time, people, God save the Republic.